I haven't seen on CNN too many times that y'all had a panel railing on Joe Biden when the average American, well, average East Tennessean was paying $600 more a month out of pocket because of crazy deficit spending.
So you may have noticed Joe Biden, he's in the news a lot lately. What is going on? First things first, there is a book coming out very soon, April 8th, where apparently Democrats expose that Joe Biden this whole time did have cognitive decline, and Joe Biden should have never ran for the presidency and a lot of other issues. But as far as today with the stock market crashing, you'll notice a lot of Democrats and left-leaning media, they're freaking out over the stock market dipping. But then when you go back in time, and this is why Joe Biden's being talked about, what about when the stock market crashed a couple of times, if not 3 times under Joe Biden? These same Democrats were not freaking out. So this will be the theme of this video, and you'll notice, hold on, are we sensationalizing what's happening today? Why all of a sudden do these Democrats care?
Sir, is this Donald Trump's economy now?
Well, I don't know that I'd call it that. Are you going to
Really?
call it that when it turns around? I mean, I haven't seen on CNN too many times that y'all had a panel railing on Joe Biden when the average American, well, average East Tennessean was paying $600 more a month out of pocket because of crazy deficit spending that we were doing and sending money overseas, borrowing money to do that.
I don't know. I've got a former.
Okay, I gotta stop right here. First off, her initial reaction of, really? Like, what did she expect? Every single time Tim Burchett comes on CNN, you know you're going to get a mic drop moment. I'm a really big fan of his. I know a lot of people who watch this channel, they like Tim Burchett. And by the way, I finally know why he keeps going on CNN. I will show you guys that here in a second. It's actually quite hilarious because he makes a comment of his own appearance on this specific CNN episode. You'll see that here in a bit, but let's get through this.
Biden aide sitting next to me. You can't see her on camera, but she is definitely nodding that we, in fact, she was in a number of tough situations where we talked plenty about those
no,
issues.
You didn't, ma'am. Joe, listen.
But seriously, my question stands.
Was mentally incompetent, and you all would never. You would always deny that, and you would talk over.
We started on the economy.
That's
what we were.
Again, this is a relevant point. I talked about this a day ago from me making this video. This book is going to be massive, and I know I keep talking about it like I'm sponsored by them, not connected to them. It's a really big deal when this whole time CNN, MSNBC, they were skipping over the fact when Republicans were saying this whole time, are you guys not seeing what we're seeing with Joe Biden? There is cognitive decline on public display. That is why Tim Burchett is talking about this. But again, as far as the economy, when did we see all of these clips 24/7 about the economy failing and us not even having a true economy? It was just money being pumped in to these government jobs and other agencies who were getting this money and sending it to the private sectors as if we had any real innovation under Joe Biden.
That was the biggest cover-up.
Sir,
that's been done.
But Donald Trump has been out there saying, this was Biden's economy. This was so bad. Like, the eggs are so expensive because I haven't had a chance yet. And voters are willing to give new presidents the benefit of the doubt. In those circumstances, do you really not?
I hate to stop here, but I always call this out on this channel. I hate when left-leaning media insults the intelligence of the viewer. The reason why the mass majority of Americans were not falling for the egg scandal is because of the work, first off, of the independent media, showing everybody the reason why we have high egg prices is because they took out all of the chickens that were sick, thus we didn't have a lot of eggs, and in the month of March, it dropped from like $8 to $2.30. So again, it's very insulting when CNN does this, trying to bring up the egg prices again. Like, why are they doing this?
Not see yesterday as a line in the sand. Before he could argue it was Biden's, and now he has to, whatever happens, good or bad, own that.
Well, I remember that, and I will say this, in the Biden administration, when it took a downturn one day, and you all just called it a correction, and there was never really much any mention of it. So it's really a double standard. Yeah, and everybody knew it was going to take a hit, but economists will tell you you can stack up a group that'll say no, and the other ones will say yes. That the market is not really a good indicator. I noticed we haven't mentioned the job growth that's happened, the so-called surprising new numbers, and I'm sure that people will say that's just Joe Biden's economy that Trump has inherited. But in fact, that is an indicator of where things are headed. And I think things are headed to more manufacturing in this country. You've seen major car manufacturers announced billion-dollar investments in this country. You've seen that across the board. In Tennessee, for instance, we're booming. And we're the number one depository of U-Haul trucks and trailers. And they're all leaving California and all the other border states to come here. So,
all right,
I think that's a good indicator.
All right, Congressman Tim Burchett.
Now, you'll notice she didn't respond to anything that he said after she freaked out on him. This is because Tim Burchett came in there with facts and information, using buzzwords like surprising job growth. Like, yeah, it's surprising to people who are falling for the outrage. Now, remember, I told you, I think we know why now he likes to come on CNN. According to Tim Burchett himself, I just go on CNN for therapy, period. So now we know why every single time Tim Burchett goes on there. I think he's just blowing off some steam. And if I recall, he tends to go on there later in the week so he doesn't have to deal with CNN over the weekend. So it makes total sense. Again, it's free therapy and he gets a little bit of exposure. And I have no problem playing every single Tim Burchett clip on this channel because, again, massive fan of his. And I think he's a very, very fair congressman. He's even called out Republicans saying, hey, that Doge stuff, there's going to be some Republicans who are not going to like it because they're even getting some money behind the scenes. So let us continue.
Their cars. I mean, we're going to be in a very, very difficult situation.
I find it insane that we're all finally concerned about inflation. That was a word that really didn't exist for many years while Joe Biden was president. But I want to point out something. Last night, Richard, you took off your shoe. You said it's made in Vietnam. It's going to be 34% more expensive next year. Today, the Secretary General of Vietnam reached out to President Trump and said, we want to have zero tariffs for both countries, proving to some degree that this is a leverage play.
One thing I want to point out, a lot of people don't know this because the media cycle really squashed this. Vietnam and the United States are actually getting closer and closer to a military agreement and alliance. So that is why right now Vietnam is a very, very key figure in the Pacific because for the first time since the Vietnam War, really, we've been economic partners for a while now, actually strong economic partners. But as far as military partners, this is very crucial for the security of the Pacific. And China does not like this. So go look that up yourselves, but this is another factor why Vietnam is actually pretty important to the United States right now.
Prove, Joe.
It proves.
What does that prove? Because at the end of the conversation, the president said, nice talking to you. And nothing about, we're going to have a deal, lower our tariffs.
I'm going to tell you what it proves.
He said, great conversation.
Let's look historically. In 1996, there was a member of Congress who stood on the floor looking at 2% tariffs we had on China, 35% tariffs they had on us. This woman demanded that we had reciprocal tariffs. You know who that was? Nancy Pelosi.
And I will show you guys all these clips here very soon. It's actually insane to see all of these Democrats who were all about tariffs and all about these negotiation tactics. Now all of a sudden, the flip-flop is happening. Again, back then in context, I don't think anyone ever expected you would have people like me sitting in a studio bringing up these clips, bringing up all the receipts. So I understand maybe why these politicians thought they could get away with the flip-flopping, to include some Republicans, by the way. But again, we will show you guys those clips later.
2008, same thing. A guy stood on the Senate floor lamenting. I'm just saying, they lamented the loss of America's workers.
Lowered its tariff barrier to 0. You know what we did? We raised our tariff barrier to 17%.
Again, just going back. Democrats have repeatedly said, I have a list of quotes here, repeatedly said we should have reciprocal tariffs on different countries and did nothing. They're a party of Cory Bookers.
All right, here's a video of Nancy Pelosi. You're going to be like, is this even the same person? If Nancy Pelosi acted the way she acts in this current video back in 1996, Republicans would love her.
How far does China have to go? How much more repression? How big a trade deficit and loss of jobs for the American worker, and how much more dangerous proliferation has to exist before members of this House of Representatives will say, I will not endorse the status quo. As I mentioned, it's about jobs, proliferation, and human rights. And there are those who say we shouldn't link human rights and trade and proliferation and trade. I disagree. But if we just want to take up this issue on the basis of economics alone, indeed, China should not receive most favored nation status.
Does that not sound like a Republican talking point? And you can go down a rabbit hole of a ton of other Democrats who sound exactly like this. So what was the change? What happened? You can leave your comments down below, and you guys let me know.
I do find it interesting in this conversation, though, about Democrats finding their free market bona fides all of a sudden. I mean, these are the same party that's been arguing that corporations need to pay higher taxes. I mean, effectively, a tariff is just a tax on corporate activity. That's what it is. And Democrats for years have argued for higher corporate tax rates, and now they're arguing against effectively a tax on corporate activity. I think if I were Donald Trump, I might next week say, you know what? I'll meet you on this. Let's slash the corporate tax rate in half, and it'll mitigate your concerns about the tariffs. I bet you wouldn't find one Democrat who would agree to it, even though it would be an amazing idea.
Now, I also want to point out at the bottom of the screen, and this might be an indicator of what direction the media is going to go in case everything actually ends up being A-OK, which most Republicans have a lot of trust in Donald Trump. Trump hits golf course as markets tank, anxiety deepens. Is this not the same playbook we see every single time? Whenever everything is actually not that bad, hey, he's playing golf. Hey, he's on vacation. Nobody is buying it. Republicans, if they were annoyed at Donald Trump for spending too many days at the golf course, then there would be more outrage without a doubt.
I hadn't been around the president before that debate, and I worked for Joe Biden, and if the people around him knew that he was not capable, it is unacceptable to me that they allowed him to go onto that stage. I deserve better as a voter, not even as a Democrat, as a voter.
Shocking. I almost have no words to hear this coming from CNN of all publications, but also from former aides who worked in the Democrat Party, even close to Joe Biden. So again, this is quite the indicator of what's to come here very soon once this book gets released. And I made a video on this before. I really truly think, and I don't say this lightly, not trying to fearmonger, not trying to turn this into something, I really think this will be politically a historic moment in American history if there were all these cover-ups. And the fact that we already have Democrats almost like washing their hands and saying, I actually am saying this is a bad thing, I don't agree with it, not good for the Democrat Party considering we are already at a 21% approval rating. And when I say we, I mean them.
And as an American, I do.
And I know that Joe Biden is a friend, but in this excerpt, the part about the pool, he went off, this is in the middle of debate prep, went off to the pool and he took a nap. And that was before the biggest debate of this campaign. That's not even the governance of the country. So Joe Biden, maybe he has the best intentions. I'm sure that you believe that. But the right decision, it seems pretty unequivocally, is that he should not have run for re-election.
Look, I was also just texting with Ron Klein, and who vehemently says he was taken out of context.
Okay, we'll have to see. In case you were unaware, Ron Klein is the one who went on national television and said, Joe Biden is good to go. He's going to be the best president ever. We know that debate didn't go well with Donald Trump, but it's all good. We will rebound. But again, there are questions as to whether or not he is telling the truth, if the Democrats who knew in the inner circle were telling the truth. It's not going to be good either way, I don't think, for anybody.
Look, we've been suffering for over 20 years. A little bit more suffering is not going to hurt us. Bring it back. This country can't feed itself. This country can't sustain its own way of life. If we get in a war with China, one of our big importers, if we're getting a war with China, how in this country is going to feed this country? How?
Okay, to give you a little context, and I love this clip because once again, you had another really big mic drop moment on CNN. CNN was asking a fisherman, a professional shrimper, if you will, fourth generation shrimper, according to the bottom of the screen, are you afraid of these tariffs? Like, what's going to happen? And his response is just so hilarious. Like, no, why would I be afraid of these tariffs?
How are we going to feed the people of this country? The farmers, they're taking the big lick. They're not farming. The fishermen, you're taking us out. Where's your food going to come from? It has to come within this country, and that way you're safe. If you're getting a war, and the way today is, you never know what's going to happen. So you need to sustain your own way of life here.
I think one thing we are learning is that the blue-collar workers, the fishermen, the miners, the auto industry, what we are really learning is that we just forgot about them at the end of the day. None of them are freaking out. None of them are afraid because they know we are dependent on their actions, on their work. Again, this is a fourth-generation shrimper. The shrimp ain't going nowhere. Let's put it that way. They're very abundant. But as far as like all of the other blue-collar workers, the only people who really seem to be making the biggest deal out of this, and there are Republicans who are not on board with these tariffs or the stock market going down, probably because they lost some money in the stock market, are the left-leaning media seems to really be honing in on this fear. Are you not worried? What's going to happen? This guy's like, no, you need me. I don't need you. So I think if we look at it from the outside perspective in on these blue-collar workers, that is why you have a lot of Americans who voted for Donald Trump who are not freaking out. There's no emotion in this for them. Whether it's Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, if she won, it doesn't matter. They still have to work to support the country. And again, we are bringing politics into a situation where we should all be coming together and saying, no, we want the stock market to go up. We want things to be better. But if anything, what we're seeing is just really these sensational headlines, especially when you cross-reference or correlate. Under Joe Biden, we had way bigger dips in the stock markets, corrections, as Tim Burchett called out, and there was no sensationalism out there in the left-leaning media. Now, this clip to me is one of the funniest moments on CNN, mainly because they have all of those red arrows in the background. The stock market is going down, everything is collapsing. However, this is what CNN had to say about this particular situation of the stock market crash and everything falling apart.
We have some more breaking news now. The March jobs report just released moments ago telling us that the U.S. economy added a stronger than expected 228,000 jobs last month, and as the unemployment rate changed only slightly, now at 4.2%. Matt Egan, back with us. Okay, what does this mean?
Imagine being on CNN and like, dang it, things are actually not that bad, but keep all of those arrows in the background because people like arrows and shapes and red colors and it works with CNN. Just make it look like everything is bad, but actually it's not.
Well, Kate, this is good news because it shows that the jobs market was in good shape in March. I think the bad news is there are growing fears that
this was March.
That this was March and that this unfortunately may not last because of the trade war. Let me run you through the numbers. 228,000 jobs added in March. Now, this was stronger than expected. This
is so misleading. I'm sorry to cut this off. Were we not already in this trade war battle with other countries, especially with Canada, our number one trading partner, with China, bringing up Panama? Again, like, this is such a cop-out to be like, oh, it was March, it might get worse.
Blew away forecasts for around 130,000. Also, this represents an acceleration from January and from February, both of which were revised lower. The unemployment rate, it did tick higher to 4.2%. That was expected. When we dig into some of the sectors here, the one that everyone's paying a lot of attention to right now is the federal government. This report showed that federal government employment did fall by 4,000 in March. That follows a 10,000 drop in February. But we're likely just starting to see this in drips and drabs because...
So again, even with all of those federal employees being fired, and I'm not about to sit here and like make fun of them or laugh at them, I do think sometimes Republicans do get the messaging wrong that, look, I understand a lot of those federal jobs were inflated under the Biden era, but sometimes I do think we have to be a little more careful with absolutely making fun of them and stuff like that.
There's a lot of people who were...
Sorry, but my point is, even despite all of those firings, the unemployment rate still did not even go up that much. What does that tell you?
Laid off, they're not yet collecting unemployment. So those numbers are likely to go even higher. Also, just one other point here on the cost of living. Wages were up again by a solid amount. It cooled a little bit, but wages were up by 3.8% year over year. That is well ahead of the most recent rate of inflation, which you can see was just below 3%. So that means paychecks are beating prices. But listen, the bottom line here is, yes, the jobs market looked pretty solid in March. But now the question is, can it make it through this test of the trade war, right? I mean,
literally no one's afraid. I don't think anyone's afraid. I am not seeing anybody who's like, 100% everything's going to fall apart, because even if things do fall apart, we are still at a higher point economically than under Joe Biden's administration, as you saw at the very first clip towards the beginning when you compared the graph. So again, a lot of this is really coming from what's going to happen. Is it going to happen? You bring on these economists and saying it might happen. We don't know what's going to happen, but again, I want to point out Donald Trump has been saying we are going to have tariffs, there will be cuts, and he was already bullying Canada into this tariff war and trade war to begin with. So anyway, let me know what you guys think about all of this. Thank you guys for being here. God bless, and we'll see you guys later.